Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
I am doing very, very well, Sarah. How are you doing?
I am doing fine. Fine.
Yes. June is almost coming to an end, and we have to...
I feel like this hiatus season is going by quicker than it did last year.
It does feel that way. I don't know if it seems that the shows are... I don't know if they ended later, maybe because Supergirl went late or something, or we're actually talking about a series during the hiatus that's airing real time instead of recapping a previous one. But I agree, you're right.
Yeah. I feel like the transition, and now Supergirl is over, so it's not making me feel disoriented, where I feel like it's still fall, spring TV airing.
Yeah.
Supergirl season 3.
Yeah.
I have not watched the season finale.
Oh, okay.
But I know exactly what happens, and I refuse to watch it.
Yeah, it was a house cleaning, I'll tell you that.
I don't get it, Will. I don't, the producers are like, oh, well, we always had plans for Chris Wood to leave after 2 seasons. And I'm like, so you changed the freaking plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what was the point?
Right. Yeah. When I watched the finale, it was, to me, it was one of those finales where the fight with Rain at this point and Supergirl, I'm just like, I'm over it. We've seen this so many times, and it's just so underwhelming at this point. Was James, going public with himself being Guardian. Again, they telegraphed that episodes ago, and they talked about it episodes ago, and they finally just did it. And so, again, to me, this was a finale that basically was let's just tie up all the loose ends, and we're going to overhaul half the cast, and we'll see you in season 4.
Stupid.
Well,
that's my very mature response to this.
Well, with Jeremy Jordan leaving and Jesse Rath coming on board as Brainy, to me that was just a 1-for-1 swap. Okay, yeah, so fine. We can, fine.
Yeah, that one, fine. But Monel, John,
the John
vital
one,
characters.
Yeah, the John one, I was mad. I really, it was happy for Alex as far as becoming chief of the DEO, but for him to just completely go away, really? I mean,
really?
Yeah, it just really, I don't know. I know a lot of folks were upset with the Supergirl finale. And rightfully so. They're fans, true hardcore fans of that show. They deserve to be upset about what was that finale.
Right. You raise a very good point. They telegraphed a lot of this stuff occurring, and that's why having this stuff actually occur in the season finale, on top of having the quote-unquote surprise departures occur, you're just like, that's way too much. Mm-hmm. Because it's just very disorienting to be in a very telegraphed finale, out of the blue spontaneity, where you're like, well, I didn't see that one coming, even though it's stupid.
Yeah.
But if the whole plan was for James to come out as the Guardian, there was this episode which would have made that plot point so much more powerful had they allowed it to unfold in that episode.
It would have been so much more so, because this was just like, well, cool. Yeah, all right.
Right, great.
Y'all talked about this, 3 episodes ago? Yeah, so, right. It was a check by the numbers season finale, and check, just get the punch board out, and we're just going to check, and then let's move on, as I said before.
Monel's sacrifice, or Kara's sacrifice, however you want to interpret that, in the season 2 finale was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Made perfect sense. Perfect hero sacrifice moment. They should have never brought him back. Don't bring him back just to send him away again. It makes no freaking sense.
Yeah.
At least allow a season to grieve over that and everything. And also, if you're going to bring him back, keep him. Because those two have really good chemistry when they are not identical.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't understand it.
Well, and maybe that's part of it too. Is one of the things I did notice as I was watching season 3, in particular, as the Legion and Mon-El has his powers manifested on Earth as a member of the Legion. It was beginning to dilute Supergirl.
Yeah, I just, there's something so great about season 2 that I feel like I went into season 3 hoping that when they did bring him back, they could recapture that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And just that romantic comedy that's very Diana Prince, Steve Trevor from Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And it did not get recaptured. And it bums me out because that's one of the things that drew me into last season. And then to get this season, which I recall first half of the season was great.
Yeah, it was.
Beautiful. Ended, like mid-season finale was one of the better mid-season finales that we've had in a while.
It was.
And then the writers fell asleep. Production got delayed. And it always is going to go back to this. Writers, you can go into a season with a plan, but if you're going to have a 23-episode season, you have to learn how to change the plans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Arrow, Felicity Smoke is a great byproduct of writers feeling more free with what they're doing and not feeling obligated to, well, we had this in mind, so we're going to stick to that, even though the viewers aren't really connecting that way.
Yeah.
No, you got to change your plan.
Yeah, you have to be willing to do it, but they were not. Or they just seem creatively. They just put themselves in a box, and I think to your point with Mon-El and Kara and their relationship, I think him going into the future and then coming back, they couldn't recapture that magic because the dynamic in the relationship had changed with him getting married and everything. It would have been better off if they had left him, brought him back later, and maybe not do it immediately after his departure in season 2. They should have just pushed it off to maybe season 4. I mean, granted, no one's ever guaranteed future seasons, but maybe it would have been better shelved that or delayed that storyline for a season.
Right. Yeah, I think there was just a lot of missteps this season towards the end, which it's funny. Over this weekend, I rewatched the movie Moneyball, and they talk about like it doesn't matter how many wins in a season you get if you lose the last game. That's all anybody remembers.
Yep.
And that's what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to watch or follow shows in the Arrowverse. And to then go away from the CW network and watch shows like Krypton and Cloak and Dagger, and there's such originality in these new properties. And I was really thinking about it this past week, and it's because there's no villain of the week happening.
Yes.
There's no, like, we have to set up this scenario and then have all of these other metaphors circling it and try to move the character. No, it's just all about character. And that's why Cloak and Dagger just continues to upping the ante with how they're exploring Tandy and Tyrone and their relationships around them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about episode 4.
Yes, let's get to it.
As so much happens. Again, I love the change of the narrative they pick up right where episode 3 begins. We need to talk. Then you are shown present day, where they've had this conversation and you're starting to notice some behavior changes. They're interacting with people differently, and everything goes back to that night when they have this long conversation and they call each other out, and they're very honest, and there's a lot of vulnerability happening. But this is just another good episode.
Yes, very solid episode. It's one of my initial reaction, at least with the story, the way they structured it. The first time I watched it, I know Patricia's not with us this week, but I felt a little bit like her in that it was unpredictable. It was at first a little hard to follow, but once I got into it, then I realized what they were doing as far as sort of using the church as a anchor, and then building these other events that were happening contemporaneous to their conversation in the church to really just deepen these two characters and why they're going to end up being the quote unquote superheroes that you anticipate when you have a show about metas.
They're not metas.
Well,
maybe
okay.
Wrong universe.
Wrong universe. Well, I think the term metahuman has been it goes across universes now.
They're more gifted.
Yeah. Well, even in gifted, they call them metas.
Oh, it's been so long since we've talked about the gifted.
Yeah.
I've forgotten. Duality.
Yeah.
So I think something that this episode really does so much better than even last week's episode is this duality when we see them interact and have this very drawn out conversation. You see the yin and you hear, I should say, the yin and yang effect of these two as everything Tyrone says, it's very hopeful and it's very almost positive like, and then Tandy's the exact opposite. And I love that point where they're talking about their powers and explaining what it feels like, and Tyrone points out, well, maybe there's a reason why we got what we got. And Tandy's first reaction is like, or maybe what we got and what we didn't get.
Yeah.
Like a very just like antagonistic almost approach to it. And I love that so much because it's like these two characters, typically other TV shows would have them like set up to be star-crossed lovers or people who think the same way and all this stuff. And it's like, no, that's not what draws them together. They're the events that they've experienced and their shared experience, and that they really are the only ones who can understand each other is one thing, but then to also have a shared understanding but very different perceptions of the world and of who they are. So yeah, I mean that's a very good point. And it's very interesting too. It's talking about how each other's powers manifest themselves. It's almost like Tyrone's powers are there it is a cloak of protection around Tandy. We've seen it. We saw it last week where she was going into trying to break into that cell wherever they had her father, and he was basically that cloak that wrapped himself around her, just like, no, don't do this, don't jump over that ledge. But also it's interesting with Tandy's powers, even though she's a very cynical by nature individual, whenever she has her visions, they're always very hopeful. When she with her mother and Greg are together. At first she was just like, this guy's just, he's crap, he's worthless, and he's just
he's just with you because, you know, he thinks you got a great ass and that kind of stuff. And, you know, but whenever she touched Greg and saw visions in the future, and with other visions that she's had with other characters like Liam and others, it's always a very hopeful, you know, the best about the people that she's dealing with at that moment. And so I think it's, again, that duality and that yin and yang, as you were saying, that, you know, these characters have, that, you know, that light versus dark. The thing is, even though, you know, Tyrone is dark place, to me it seems that Tandy's actually the you know, despite her visions, she's actually in normal day-to-day interactions the dark one, and Tyrone's in the good place, as Tandy pointed out. You know, you got this great house and you got this great life and everything, and then but it opens up the door to this real strong and, you know, right on the point discussion about privilege and race and class, and you know, Tyrone's like, well, you know, you can't, you know, well, it looks like all that, but I have a great life and all that stuff, but I'm a black kid in New Orleans who can, you know,
Yep.
cops see me as a thug, you know, and Tyrone's vision is, you know, she is, you know, white female, she's like ballet lessons and, you know, not really knowing all her, you know, life as far as what's transpired since her father's death. And, you know, this is, like you said, this series is great about taking what you think would be the usual construct with star-crossed lovers, and they're going to get and have you know, happy storyline as far as them discovering their love for each other and blah blah blah. But it's really not unfolding that way. They, you know, as they both said, one person thinks the universe is pulling them together, the other person's like, wait a minute, no, everything's pulling us apart.
Yeah, the privilege conversation is brilliant.
Yeah.
On a lot of different levels and for a lot of different reasons. Which we knew was coming because I may have spoiled it, but
you spoiled it,
right? And I think even though we kind of knew it was coming, it's still some of the stuff that they said and was brought up surprised me, because it wasn't even a straightforward conversation about privilege, where they brought up some other stuff that stood out to me, at least, where privilege has a lot of different degrees, and there's a lot of different factors involved with it, and not everything is face value. And like when Tandy brought up the two parents thing, I had never thought about that before. But Tyrone in the police department, that was a really good edited scene, and I love the sound design. I'm just gonna go there.
Yeah, tell us more what you thought about the sound design there. I mean, I know, like last week we had the, you know, with Tandy with the concussion, you had the ringing in the background and stuff.
Right. Well, the sound design in this episode that stood out is Tyrone, obviously, in the police station, but he has so much anxiety going there, which is explained with his conversation to Tandy about all the reasons why he can't just go call out Detective O'Reilly and have a conversation with him. And so Tandy convinces him to construct this narrative, and, you know, it's the only way. You gotta play your cards right, and you gotta be strategic. So he tries it, but he gets into the police station and he meets the cop and sits down, and the cop goes to get paperwork, and it's given him the opportunity to look around at where he is, and all he sees is white.
Yeah.
And then they were very smart to use the sound design to kind of mirror the anxiety that's occurring internally, and that kind of blurriness, kind of like I shouldn't be here, concern, fear, whatever you may call it. But they kind of just made all of the voices get louder, but you also couldn't understand anything that was being said. So it was very, and I keep using this word tonight, I'm sorry, but disorienting.
It was.
And then he gets up and leaves.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was disorienting. It was a very, very powerful scene. Whenever I watched it the first time, I could really, you know, you could really identify with the anxiety that he was feeling. I mean, he was already not sure about this as well, but whenever he first encountered the desk officer there who was checking him in, his anxiety and his not believing that it so like overwhelming that he knew it wasn't going to work out. But at the end of the show, when he did go back and follow through and carry out what he and Tandy had come up with, it was much stronger. He definitely had the confidence and the believability that, you know, I can do this and this is going to work as far as changing the narrative, which again is a good carry forward from the message that they laid out last week as far as creating that new narrative, creating that new story. Don't do the same thing over and over again if you want to change the outcome, which I like about what they're doing with this show. They're not just dropping these lines of dialogue just to put out there for for like great power comes great responsibility, blah blah blah, and it's just kind of cliched. They're carrying it forward and showing how these characters are trying to change the narrative and change the story. Unfortunately, and in Tyrone's case, yeah, he had the epic fail the first time because of, like, as you laid out, with the anxiety of being able to call out Detective O'Reilly in this police station, and all the fears and anxieties and everything bore out. But by the end of the episode, he turned it around. Tandy, and I want to go back to the scene in the church. Him kicked in the right direction, but for her, there was that very dark and that very deep conversation about suicide.
Yeah. Can we talk about one other thing before we get into that part of the conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we focus so much on Tyrone going to the police, or talking about how Tyrone went to the police station. Mm-hmm. And that's a very important thing at the end of how he goes back and he does ask to talk to Detective O'Reilly because he's finally worked up that courage. Especially after all of Tandy's like, no, you got to do this. You got to.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you're also experiencing Tyrone telling Tandy, you have to start letting people in. Like, not everybody's a liar. Not everybody's out to get something or take something away from you. Mm-hmm. And so you got to stop running and confront.
Yeah.
And start sticking around and seeing it through. And that leads into this whole relationship with Greg. Greg mm-hmm. becomes a very important character who dies.
Yes.
and man, this is like Tandy, like, you know why she doesn't have hope in this episode. Like, you totally get it because she's very cynical and critical of the whole situation between Greg and her mom, and then she realizes that Greg is a good guy because she used her power, and then in a snap of the fingers, everything is gone, like all of that hope. And between her mother breaking up with Greg, to her going to his office, and which is mirroring what happened when Tyrone was in her subconscious.
Yep.
Like, her standing on the outside watching this man, potential father figure, be taken away from her by Roxanne.
Yep. Again.
Again. Like, history for Tandy just does keep repeating itself. Mm-hmm. But she through this, she is able to finally start to realize that she does have a weapon on her that she hasn't been using, and she can draw upon, and that is her dagger, her dagger of light that she needs to hold on to help her solve what happened to her dad, or get justice for her dad. And I love that moment. Like, there's so many great mother-daughter moments in this episode where you realize that The mom came off as very cliche for me early on in the season, but like that realization that her mom isn't just trying to win this case for the money. Like, her mom is trying to get justice for what happened to her dad, because she, like Tandy, knows that he was wronged. Mm-hmm. Their whole family was wronged in this, and it just isn't about the money or the house or any of that materialistic thing. It's just a reputation.
Yep. Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm glad we brought up Greg again, because
R.I.P. Greg.
R.I.P. Greg. Yeah, it's just it's you really nailed it on the fact that Tandy. There is a adjustment, a basis for her being so cynical, because every moment she was young, when we were first introduced to her as a young ballerina, and the cynical, not being able to depend on her mother when we first were introduced to her, and then also her father, and then everyone being out for themselves. Even though this Liam kid, I don't know. He just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
But that was as far as people in her lives, that's like the only one who so far hasn't been like always working the angle to let her down. But it's great. But getting back to Greg, just when things are, like you said, getting that, this guy is into my mother. There was a scene where, Greg's current wife calls and, just kind of, blows up the good mood that was sort of starting to permeate Tandy and her mom and Greg, and dang, and, once again, narrative that we were stuck in, this is not going to work, that, it's coming to a head. But then, Greg, on the other hand, is like, no, we're going to make this work. But of course, Tandy's mother now is like, no, Tandy was right. It's just another guy who's just out to get some, and then he's just going to move on. So, so when that moment happens, when he's murdered by the Exxon, but Roxxon, Roxxon assassin, was a very jarring and unpredictable moment that, when that happened, I was like, oh shit.
I'm never going to trust anybody to bring water into the office ever again.
Exactly.
It could be gasoline.
But it was, but again, it just reinforces why Tandy is the way she is. Cause there's no silver lining. And, but Greg
is starting to change.
Yeah, she is starting to change. And she realized there is a little bit of a silver lining, because Greg was indeed working on this Roxxon case to help her family get justice for her father. Mm-hmm. And good thing she is a very observant person and saw those files in the safe and knew where to get them. Greg is the perfect get us these files so that hopefully we can get, I guess. And there's no villain of the week, but clearly the villain in the story so far has been Roxxon for Tandy, and O'Reilly for Tyrone. And will they, are there all these two villains intertwined somehow?
Yeah. I also like how, talk about unpredictable, because you think like that would be the end of the episode, but no, there's still a little bit more.
Yeah.
And because her first reaction is not to grab the files.
No.
That scene when she goes back to the house and she overhears her mom leaving the 6th voicemail for Greg, apologizing. Like, we spent a lot of time talking about Tandy's hope, but her mom is so much like her all grown up. Like, there's this woman involved in this whole mess that keeps also putting all her cards on the table, and then Roxanne just changes the game, changes the rules, and she doesn't even realize that. And then for Tandy, like, what is Tandy supposed to do? Like, hey mom, so Greg's dead. He's not returning your phone call. No, Tandy does the only thing she can think of about doing right now, especially because of the conversation with Tyrone, and she's like, I'm done. I'm going to cash in. I'm done with this. This is never going to work out for me. So I'm going to do the one thing I've been too scared to do for a while now. And she legitimately goes and tries to kill herself.
Yeah.
And it's just, it reminds me so much about the Hulk. I don't know why, but this idea that like Bruce Banner in the Avengers movies is always talking about how he has tried to kill himself.
Yep.
And it doesn't work. He doesn't die.
Yep.
And in this moment, Tandy's power is what saved her. And this realization that she is so much stronger than the situation she's been put in. Yep. And this is going to guide her to get the vengeance that she needs for her family. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was very poetic. But I mean, to talk about the suicide, I think that's a very another unexpected turn in that conversation. I did not see that coming. However, it made sense. All of their conversation, the more we talk about it, the more it's just so true that the entire conversation was telegraphed in last week's episode through the visions. Mm-hmm. Because everything was kind of pointed out and just been like, yeah, this is what you think about. I mean, we knew that Tandy's interpretation of that night was that she was wanted to be the one who died, while Tyrone just wanted his brother to live. It's a very different perspective.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it's a different perspective, and and it was very telling where Tyrone was starting to lecture her about suicide. And and she just drops a bomb on him. It's like, dude, don't even. I mean, you've like committed suicide by cop, and so many times when she saw his vision, her vision as far as what Tyrone. So even though he was trying to be, calling out her quote unquote being selfish or whatever, she was, putting the mirror back to him and showing him how, he was just also doing the same thing. And the path that he was on was going to basically lead him to his own demise as well.
Exactly. Yep. Very interesting. Very interesting. They're like magnets.
They are.
In an inverse way. We talked a lot about Tandy and her mom, but on the opposite side, because we're talking Cloak and Dagger, so there's always an opposite. You have Tyrone and his dad.
Yeah.
And Spy Boy and the Cloak.
Yes, the Cloak. We finally... That was... whenever that scene was sort of unfolding, that Otis being the previous Spy Boy and going into the Wild Railhawks, and basically having to prove himself again to his community. A good way of showing sort of another layer of privilege,
right?
Because they were basically clearly, Otis has moved on and moved out, and he goes back to his roots, and the folks there were like, dude, what are you doing here? Say, no, look, I'm still one of you, even though I may be over here on this other side of the other ward, quote unquote, made it. So you had that dynamic going. It was a good moment to show the depth of Tyrone and Otis, his father's relationship as well. Especially when he called him out with the bolt cutters.
Right.
And they've touched on the quote unquote overprotective nature of the parents. Tyrone's all they have left now. And they start off with that, and you're just sort of like, oh, they're going to go down this route again. But no, Tyrone to this place, and he learns about the Spy Boy, and we learn that going through the culture and the beads, and as far as explaining the beadwork and how to control it, and how one mistake can just undermine weeks worth of work. And then just, the line about, all in the other room is where all the stuff that's been messed up goes. And It was a big, and it was a good moment again as far as just showing, this relationship with Tandy and Tyrone as far as that they are quote unquote the rejects.
Mm-hmm.
But when he goes back there and the cloak, he sees that cloak and it's calling to him, and then just a powerful moment there where they realize that it was Billy's cloak as he was training to be the potential new spy boy.
Right.
Yeah, it was just so well done, and so powerful in that moment because I think it caused Otis and Tyrone to again come to grips with Billy's death.
It's a different form of atonement.
Yeah.
Like we've seen Tyrone now for a few episodes kind of clearly be a martyr for his brother's death and just deliberately not allow anything good to happen, but he and his father taking him to this place with a lot of cultural history for his family and his brother and this legacy and him realizing that there's another way to do this. There's another way to uphold my promise to my brother and my family and make them proud while at the same time not committing death by cop.
Yeah.
Or like just another form of like, I'm gonna do this. The line that stood out to me in the description about the beadwork was that every year is a new costume and because every year you're a different person. And I think that's such a good line to put out there, especially for a teenage drama.
Yeah.
Because that's part of growing up, realizing that you're always going to be changing, your experiences change, and there's so much change occurring within this episode alone with these two characters that I think it was a very pivotal moment. But yeah, it's just keep with the unexpected writing, the plot.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know.
Yeah, please do. I mean, it's so. I was actually after the episode aired Thursday, I was chatting with someone on Twitter about it, and they actually were praising the series for that very reason. It's just like they're like, oh yeah, thanks for reminding me it was on, but two, they were just talking about what made them enjoy it so much is the unpredictable nature of it.
Yeah. Well, until next time. Hopefully we'll learn more about Roxxon.
Yeah.
Roxxon? Alright, so Cobra Kai.
That's why I'm so tired. I got sucked in and did a marathon of Cobra Kai.
Because it's brilliant, and you should have done the marathon a long time ago.
I know.
It's such your kind of cup of tea.
Yeah. Which is funny because I've told you before I was not a big fan of the Karate Kid movies growing up, but fun, nostalgic ride that now I am going to go back and actually watch the first Karate Kid again because
it has that effect.
Yeah.
It changes the way you're gonna watch that movie.
It does. It really, really does. It changed how I feel about that. About the movie because growing up, I just was not a fan of Daniel. And 30 plus years later, my feelings have been confirmed.
Yeah. So Cobra Kai, it's on YouTube Red. Strongly encourage anybody to sit down, watch it. It's short, it's sweet, and it does some really interesting stuff to a classic movie.
Mm-hmm.
And changes and it was just so funny because I'm a 90s kid, so I grew up on 80s movies in a weird way. No, it's always this thing where those movies were always the childhood movies to make the 90s kids watch.
Yep.
But Cobra Karate Kid wasn't really high on the list. I've seen it multiple times, but it's not like, oh my God, it's not like The Breakfast Club. Okay, let's just put it out there.
No, yeah. Well, what is The Breakfast Club? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Goonies. A few others. So yeah.
I know we talked earlier in DMs today about the parallels of the story between Daniel and, I guess, Johnny's son and then Miguel. Yeah. So evolution of Miguel was I liked what they did there. Because,
oh yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah, because he was the geek, the nerd who couldn't beat up all the time and stuff, and then spoiler alert, he has this moment in the cafeteria where so many things happens in the school cafeteria, good and bad. But for Miguel, who is so, spoiler alert, Johnny is, for folks who remember Karate Kid, Johnny Lawrence was the classic bully, and I think William Zabka was like the bully in like every film from the 80s. So he is the character's present day. Daniel LaRusco is big, owns a bunch of car dealerships in Southern California now. Johnny's just basically, the jock gone loser, the big man on campus who now is the, adult loser who's just barely keep hanging on the jobs and stuff. Yeah, so he ends up helping this kid out and starts his own karate dojo. Yeah, and the growth of the dojo and Miguel's, who's the kid that Johnny helps out, and what happens at the end of season 1, and Johnny's reaction to it, where he has that realization, I think, is what's so critical to me as far as what made this series work.
Oh no, it's like a Johnny Lawrence redemption story, yeah. And why it really helps is because then you have these two kids, Robbie and Miguel, who naturally should be, like, there's a lot of crisscross occurring here, where the apprentice for Johnny should actually be the apprentice for, now I'm forgetting his name. Daniel.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. And the fact that, well, under these circumstances, they ended up with the apprentices that they did get. This builds this complicated web, yes, where they both realize, they both have these realizations that they may not have been so much of the hero, or they may not be the right person to influence these young minds that can have a really long-lasting effect on somebody's future and somebody's moral code and who they become. Like, teenage years, you're still figuring out who you are in the world, and to be heavily influenced negatively or positively determines future outcomes. And I love that. I love that realization. I love his kind of regret over it, but he also did get what he wanted.
Yeah.
And then he comes face to face with his old master.
Yeah.
And that sets up season 2, and immediately you're like, why can't I have season 2 right now?
Exactly.
Because I need to know what happens.
I need to know what happens. Yes, totally.
And so another part about this that is kind of unexpected is that you have Daniel's son's daughter, who plays a very integral role, but she, because times have changed, does not play the same girl character as in the original movie. Like, no. At the end of the day, they hinted at it that she could be in that tournament this time next season.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's on. I mean, she's on. Yeah, she and Miguel are going to be facing off at the end of that tournament.
Which is great, because that's something that never occurred to me in that movie, the lack of female karate. And I love that thing that Johnny ends up doing where he's just like, women can't do karate.
Yeah.
And then they go back and forth. And she becomes like one of his favorite people.
Yep.
Oh man, but I think like there's like I was telling you, this is nostalgia based,
totally.
So much nostalgia, but they also put just enough modern day parallels to make it work for anyone.
It does work. It completely does. I guess that's just a part of the good storytelling, and I guess it speaks to first how strong the original Karate Kid movie was to begin with. But two, it also plays on the wave of nostalgia that we've seen in recent times with things like Ready Player One and other reboots of shows from the 80s.
Stranger
Things. Stranger Things, definitely. Or straight up reboots of 80s shows like Dynasty and others. Partly because, people who watch this stuff are now the people who produce all these shows. But like you were saying, as a 90s kid, you grew up watching these 80s films, and there's a market for it. And when you have a well done, this is not a reboot. This is just a continuation. And when you have a strong continuation, it works very well.
Yeah, you know why the actors came back, and that hopefully there'll be future cameos and future realizations that just continue this legacy the right way.
Yeah, so this is definitely a summer TV binge recommendation that
it's a breeze.
Yeah, it's a breeze. You can knock it out in a very short order, and definitely recommend it.
Yeah. So, Will, that's it for us tonight. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me when I'm more coherent at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me less coherent on Twitter at SJ Belmont, at SJBELMONT. And please follow our crew on Twitter at SNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on both iTunes and SoundCloud and Spotify. We will be taking a break of our normally scheduled recordings, but we do have a very, very, very special recording that will be dropped the week of 4th of July, so be on the lookout for that. And on that note, I say to you all, good night, geek out, you're well.